Welcome to a Modern Nonprofit podcast. I'm Tosha Anderson, your host. I am the managing partner of the Charity CFO. And while I do accounting in my daytime, that is primarily what I do. One of the things that I really love and that I'm equally as passionate about is marketing. A lot of people may not realize that. And if I can blend both marketing with data and measuring the financial impact of what that marketing actually means for any business, especially a nonprofit organization, sign me up for that conversation. And that's the conversation we're actually going to have today. We're going to talk a little bit more about marketing, and we're also going to be talking about how to track it. What does the data mean? How should you be looking at marketing with respect to your nonprofit? I'm not an expert necessarily in this space, although I like to say that I'm a chief marketing officer at the Charity CFO, having no business actually being the chief marketing officer, but here we are anyway. I'm going to bring along my new friend, Jeff Greenfield. Jeff, you are an expert in this space. You are the CEO and founder of Provalytics, and you work with businesses on exactly that, right? Marketing, tracking, data, all of those sorts of things.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's one of those line items, if you will, in the P&L that has the most questions associated with it. It has the most sources associated with it. And it kind of goes back to that old saying of that John Wanamaker was this famous marketer from the Midwest, where you're at there, Tasha, who
Hmm.
said, half the money I spend in advertising is wasted. The only problem is I don't know which half.
I love that.
And
It's so true.
that it kind of plagues all marketers. It always has. But now in the world of digital, with all the different places you can spend money, and then each of these different platforms having an opinion on
Hmm.
how many
Hmm.
leads or how many
Hmm.
widgets you sold, and they all don't know about each other, you end up with numbers that don't add up at all, and it just becomes a confusing mess for folks. And that's one of the big riddles today with marketing. That's what we help marketers solve.
It really is. And I find this conversation really fitting because I was in a board meeting last night and we were talking about marketing. And I come across this conversation all the time where nonprofit leaders, first of all, largely don't have a ton of experience in marketing because even if you did have some experience in marketing, the landscape of marketing is constantly changing. And in my world, what I'm thinking about right now, I think about marketing in many ways as kind of digital marketing, right? And there's so many different elements of digital marketing. And I think every nonprofit I've ever worked with has a common challenge. They're spending money on marketing, not really sure if it's working, loosely defining what marketing is, really challenging themselves and asking the question, why are we doing this particular marketing? And I would say, in my experience, working kind of in that small to middle market nonprofit space, so think somewhere between like 1 and 10 million, marketing feels like, at least in conversation, maybe it includes some sort of like ongoing newsletter, certainly a baseline website, right? Maybe maybe a social media presence, maybe not super consistent social media presence, but a need for social media presence. And I don't know if I've really come across a nonprofit that I've worked with, even professionally working relationship with them, or even just, through networking communication, nonprofits that feel like they do a really effective job with marketing. And that's, Jeff, especially the reason why I wanted to have this conversation with you and kind of get some of your insights on some of these issues. So let me just fire away. Why is it so hard for businesses or nonprofits to get a clear picture of how marketing is actually working for them?
Well, I think one of the biggest issues in terms of understanding how it's working is that the ecosystem, and you alluded to this, has changed drastically since
Hmm.
COVID and the lockdowns.
Hmm.
It used to be that everything online was 100% trackable. And what I mean by that is that for very large companies who are spending in the tens to hundreds of millions of dollars each year, and when you think about a middle market nonprofit, they don't have the same tools that those folks use, but they have the same opportunities to get to some of the same answers. You used to be able to track everything. And what I mean by that is there's two aspects to advertising and marketing. One is somebody came to your website to find out about you. So there was a click. Where did
Hmm.
that click come from?
Hmm.
But then also more importantly is what ad did they see that built
Hmm.
the awareness so that they actually would click and come to your website?
Hmm.
And so that awareness piece is the piece that went away with COVID. You can't get that awareness piece anymore because of how the internet and advertising functions, all because of privacy. So as a
Hmm.
result, what's happened is most marketers live in this world of clicks only. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's a belief set that the way marketing works is I invest dollars to buy clicks, and clicks lead to leads, and that leads to members and
Mm-hmm.
donations and so on and
Mm-hmm.
so forth. But that's not how marketing works. The way marketing works is you invest dollars to buy attention. You're buying
Mm-hmm.
eyeballs for
Mm-hmm.
like a
Mm-hmm.
split second. And what you're trying to do with that attention is build awareness. And when awareness is built up to a high enough level, I always say people will walk into your store.
Mm-hmm.
And if your store happens to be online, and for most nonprofits it is, that means you get visits to your website. So the problem is that most folks are stuck in that world of the click because that's
Mm-hmm.
what they can see in their Google Analytics, and they
Mm-hmm.
don't understand where to get the rest of the information. And so
Right.
as a result, they end up optimizing and making decisions on where to invest their actually marketing dollars or marketing efforts towards clicks, which are the after effect of the awareness. And one of the things that all nonprofits talk about, because I know I'm on a nonprofit board, is how do we get more awareness out there? How do we
Sure.
build more awareness? How do we get more board members? How do we get more members? How do we get
Mm-hmm.
more donations? And the only way to do that is build more awareness.
Mm.
And that's where we want to focus our efforts on. So that's one of the biggest problems with marketing and why people feel confused about it, because when you focus in on those clicks and you make decisions based upon it, you kind of feel like you're turning in circles. You don't feel like your efforts are having any impact whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's probably the biggest problem that's happening today for most businesses.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. As someone that has a business that pays attention to, clicks and things like that. I mean, would you say in your experience with nonprofits, it's almost even a layer beneath that in the sense of when I talk about marketing, it's almost a lack of clarity on what you're trying to do with that marketing. So, for example, I'll give you an example. I was in a board meeting last night, and we were talking about revamp the website. And then, of course, that always opens up Pandora's box, not just aesthetically what's on it, but somebody asks the question, if somebody goes to our website, to your point, the goal ultimately is to build awareness of the organization. But how do we do that, right? Okay, let's talk about our website. Well, people aren't just going to naturally stumble across your website and be like, "Wow, what a great website. I'm going to, participate in this organization." Maybe that's true, but maybe you need to work on the mechanics behind the scenes that drive more traffic to your website, right? Like SEO, for example, like making your website more searchable. So that's like a whole nother component. But back to the conversation last night. The conversation was, well, when people go to our website, what do we want them to do? Because nonprofits have so many different audiences or stakeholders. To your point, is it to get new board members? Is it to get new donors? Is it to give resources to those that might be benefiting from our programs? There's all these different stakeholders. And so I shared in that board meeting, it was really interesting. I shared a quote that another nonprofit leader gave me one time. And she said, when somebody comes to my website, I want one of two things, if not both. I want their name, or I want their money, or I want both. And that sounds kind of direct, but the reality is, if they're not giving you a donation, then maybe they're giving you their contact information. And that contact information could lead to a volunteer, could lead to a more formal board member role. It could lead to a program participant. It could lead to a future donor if they're keeping tabs on your newsletter and that sort of thing. So, really, I think kind of going back and thinking about the why, like what are we doing these marketing efforts for, and being really clear about that makes it, I think, a little bit easier to figure out what to measure, right? Because there's so many things you can measure in marketing. Well, anything. I mean, coming from an accountant, we find ways to measure everything, right?
Hmm.
Let's break it down into numbers and we can measure numbers. I don't know. Do you see that to be a, a, um, a gap or a hurdle for nonprofit leaders to kind of shift away from like, this is just a necessary thing we need to have on a website? It's like, well, let's like peel back the layers a little bit and ask ourselves why. What are we trying to do here with this?
I think that's an important point because I think a lot of nonprofits forget the fact that they're a business first.
Hmm.
They are, or you could say we're a nonprofit first, but we still have to run a business. It is a
Hmm.
business
Hmm.
with a specific goal. Most of them are to get volunteers, to raise
Hmm.
money. And you have to, even though you're a nonprofit, you still need to optimize your website. You need to A/B test and test different things to see what's
Hmm.
working and what's not working. I mean,
Hmm.
simple things like a color of a button
Hmm.
on a donation button can increase or decrease your donations by as much as 50 to 80%. I mean, it's as simple as that if you
It's
have enough
incredible.
traffic going to the website. So those types of things, that kind of business mindset is important to running these nonprofits from a marketing standpoint of view, without a doubt. Definitely.
Hmm. So let's talk about another observation that I've had because, the accountant in the room, I put together or participate in the creation of annual budgets every year. And it is, I think, no secret. Anybody listening probably can relate to this, that there is usually not a lot of dollars invested in true kind of marketing for nonprofit organizations. And I'm really clear from your perspective. So, how does unclear marketing data or maybe unclear marketing strategy or objectives, how does that make it even harder to maybe justify budgeting and planning from a financial investment standpoint? I have to believe that has a part in why it's difficult to make the case we need to invest in marketing because we don't really know how to measure the impact, right?
Yeah, but I think at the end of the day, you have to step back again, applying just basic business principles.
Hmm.
And that, our donations last year were X. You got to remove the donations that are ones that are planned, that are always on type of
Hmm.
thing. And then look at the other donations that came in and then look at your cost per donation or cost per dollar. What did you spend in
Hmm.
order to get that, in order to project out for your budget and then be able to project out a budget that you're actually going to spend on marketing and then have a plan towards activating new donors, new volunteers, and things like
Hmm.
that. I mean, it's again, it's applying business principles and using marketing to acquire. What's changed, though, and you alluded to this earlier on, is that where people get their information has changed dramatically. I mean,
Hmm.
right now, the number one television network in the US for the last almost 7 months going is not NBC or CBS or Disney, it's YouTube.
I knew you were going to say
Yeah, and
that.
and we're not talking YouTube with people watching it on their phone or watching shorts. We're talking people looking on their big screen at home at night, watching YouTube
Mm,
as their main source of information and shows. So that's incredibly powerful. They have
mhm,
overtaken, it's not Fox, it's not NBC. YouTube is the number one
mm,
source.
mhm,
And so
mhm,
you have to ask yourself, if you're a nonprofit today, where are you investing your dollars? Where are you investing your energy? So, like, for example, if you have social media presence, that's awesome. If you're going after, if your demographic that you're going after is people over the age of 40, you should be in Facebook and Instagram because that's where they are.
mhm, mhm,
But if you're
mhm.
looking to go after a younger demographic, you have to be on TikTok. You
Right.
have to be on YouTube. You have to be on those places. So
Mhm,
that's the nice thing, is that the ages of where people are at are very distinct in terms of where they get their information, where they look, and where they learn. But what that also means is, from a board perspective, you need to make sure that you're updating your tactics and your techniques, and
mhm.
that you're being as active as you should be, both in terms of presence, being there, but also in terms of your media dollars, in terms of spending them and learning how to use those to acquire donors and volunteers.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I have so much to unpack with that, and I'm on the fence of whether I want to go down that rabbit hole or not. But I think one of the tricky things with nonprofits and their marketing, where I see a lot of the, let's just call it like dollars invested, is less like paid advertising. And we can certainly probably have a whole nother episode about paid advertising and whether that's something nonprofits should pursue or not, just in terms of like ads and that sort of thing to build awareness. But I oftentimes see that a lot of marketing dollars are being invested into people, right? Into full-time positions. And oftentimes it looks something like a hybrid role of development, marketing, communications, sometimes even volunteer management, sometimes even event planning, all of these sorts of things. So I think where it also gets tricky with the investment of marketing is that it's blurred into multiple different roles, and it makes it difficult to piece out like, okay, how much is, our marketing dollars how much is that is moving the needle on our overall brand awareness, marketing strategy as a whole, but then maybe kind of questioning, is there a different way to be doing this? And should we be investing our dollars more intentionally? And what do I mean by that? Maybe consider outsourcing marketing function, right? And having a strategy partner to be working with in that way. I will say I don't have a full-time marketing person on my team. I work with different consultants because that's something that I've said many, many times publicly on this podcast that people don't really realize. In order to really get the biggest bang for your buck on marketing is accepting the reality that marketing is so nuanced and specialized. And so, like, hiring the right people that do the right things and assuming a generalist is going to be able to move the needle on all of the different things that we're talking about. So, kind of measuring marketing data and setting a strategy and executing on the strategy to me is like the evolution of a marketing function. Maybe it's 2.0, right? And to be able to move into that space, my advice is just to really strongly consider hiring the specialists you need in that marketing space. Jeff, would you agree with this or no?
No, I definitely would. And, when you look at marketing budgets, there's two aspects to it. There's working media, non-working media, or non-working dollars. The
Mm,
working dollars are the ones that you're actually putting towards paid advertising.
okay.
The non-working dollars are the dollars that you would pay like a commission. It's the dollars for your staff and your team. I think
Okay.
that nonprofits, historically have used a lot of the marketing dollars and a lot of their dollars to beef up their staff, their
Hmm.
presence,
Hmm.
if you will.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
where I don't see that nonprofits have really started to utilize some of the really great tools that AI have started to offer. They tend
Hmm.
to be a little slower to these things that can take on a lot of these
Hmm.
tasks and or outsourcing as well,
Hmm.
because that saves, substantial dollars, and you end up with essentially a full-time team member for the cost of a tenth of what you would pay here. Because at the end of the day, the goal of the nonprofit is to deliver whatever services they're supposed to be delivering to whatever it is they're doing.
Yeah,
Uh, and when you can apply more of those dollars towards that, then that's a win for everyone. But they tend to, they move a little slower than others, which is fine. A lot of
sure.
organizations are like that. But I think it's important to understand that one of the benefits of marketing is to be able to utilize paid advertising as a way to get attention. And that's
Hmm.
really the goal with all of this is, it's great to have a wonderful website, but if no one's looking at it, it's not doing you any
Right.
good. So
Right.
paid,
Exactly.
paid advertising is incredibly important and a great tool for anyone to use. But again, having a generalist doing it, you cannot expect to have exceptional results.
Yeah, because even if you have a great generalist, they don't know how to set up paid advertising, right? To your point. And I think the takeaway that I'm walking away with this particular part of the conversation is that if your organization is spending something on marketing, even if it's a partial salary for a full-time person, because part of their role is on marketing. As you had said, Jeff, there's working dollars and not working dollars. That as an organization of probably any business, but including nonprofits, that we need to have a combination of both working and not working dollars. Is that fair to say?
100%.
And so just to clarify too, non-working dollars, let's just kind of wrap that up and let's just, for simplicity's sake, say kind of our ongoing internal staff dollars. The working dollars, though, would be things like paid advertising and what else would you say? Would you factor in any sort of like campaigns, direct mailing campaigns? Would that be part of it? Direct mailing. Okay, what other options?
Any
Just to
type of
kind of
direct mail,
okay.
SEO efforts, anything that you're doing to get attention that you're
Mm-hmm.
spending dollars on. If you're sponsoring a baseball little league and you've got
Mm-hmm.
some sign, if you're paying to put your name someplace, a
Mm-hmm.
sponsorship, anything like that, those are working dollars, meaning I'm spending X and I'm expecting a return of X times two or three or
Mm-hmm.
four or 10. Because
Mm-hmm.
those are numbers that when it comes down at the end of the year and you want to evaluate your effectiveness, you don't want to include that non-working dollars because those dollars are staff. Those you don't expect a return on
Mm-hmm.
those like you do on your working media dollars.
Okay. Now, what if somebody were to say, but Jeff, I would expect some level of return on staff, like output or their efforts. Like how would you How would you explain the difference there?
Yeah, I would say you expect output from all staff. Um,
True.
but you can't put you could always add up all that you're spending on staff and look at your total revenue that you brought in and say, okay, per head,
Hmm.
we're making X. But that's
Hmm.
different than media dollars. Media dollars, like when you do a direct mail campaign, you spend $5,000.
Hmm.
You're expecting, okay, historically we spent 5 grand, we got 50 back. I at
Hmm.
least want to get
Hmm.
50 back. But if all of a sudden you do a direct mail campaign, you only get 30, well,
Right.
now your projections are off, and now you're going to reevaluate. Should we really do that in the second half of the year? Maybe there's something better we can do with the 5 grand to get closer to 50 grand like we were expecting.
Gotcha.
With the team member, you're not looking at them in that way. You're looking at them to
Hmm.
do task for you versus getting an actual return on your investment.
That makes sense. So kind of putting in the nonprofit speak, like you wouldn't have a special event like a gala without that expectation of a return on that investment. Same way
Exactly.
with your campaigns. Like typically if you're going to do kind of a special campaign at the end of the year with a nice, annual report or something that you might include a nice like graphically designed piece with some sort of envelope to solicit gifts, you would expect some sort of return on that. So that makes sense. Different than, your marketing and communications coordinator that's doing social media. It's like, yes, it creates an element of presence online, but I think a lot of nonprofits are hopeful that that translates into gifts. And I think, yes, it could, but I feel like it's overly optimistic to assume that posting on social media a few times a week is going to translate into a significant stream of like revenue and ongoing gifts. Like I said, I think it's more of just like an awareness building piece that's a long game approach, if you will.
It's definitely awareness building, but also remember that the platforms that you're posting in, uh,
Hmm.
when you post and people are, you put a message up there and people respond and comment, you're posting for free. And that
Hmm.
actually costs Facebook and Instagram
Hmm.
money when you do
hmm
that.
hmm
There's only going to be a certain level that they're going to let you get to before. And
hmm
anyone who's been active on Facebook for years, in the beginning, you would build up a presence and you would put out a message and all 20,000 people in your community would get the message. Everyone would respond. And when advertising came in, people started to realize, well, not everyone's getting the message. And now you have to boost post in order to get there. You actually have to spend dollars. And
Right.
that's part of the game. If you're going to use our platform and use our tools, which cost us money, you can use it as much as you want, but we're going to limit your reach, which
Hmm.
getting awareness is all about maximizing your reach. And
Hmm.
if you want to get more reach, you got to spend some dollars. My wife does a lot of work in the dog adoption space, which is very popular online. And
hmm
most of these adoption nonprofits use Facebook as a tool to communicate.
Sure.
And all of them have seen their reach drop dramatically, and all of them spend
Oh.
a significant amount of money on boosting posts in order to generate increasing adoptions, increasing donations. Uh, Remember, these platforms are there to make money. They're not there.
Right. Right.
Meta is definitely not a nonprofit, which is the owner of Facebook. So that without a doubt, they are not a nonprofit. They're one of the most profitable companies in the world. And
Hmm.
people will also tell you some of our clients, some of the largest advertisers in the world, from the data that we see, if you spend the same amount of money in the same week this year than you did last year, fewer people will see your ads. And that's because the
mm
rates keep going up. Every
mm.
year they go up. The profits for these companies keep going up. So they incentivize you to get you to the point where you will eventually start to boost a post.
Sure. You're kind of left with no other option unless you come up with a different marketing strategy completely. So I mean, you bring a
Exactly.
good point. I mean, it's a pay to play environment and just assuming that, ongoing just, free post is going to have a tremendous difference is Probably a little naive if I'm thinking about it, from my perspective. I mean, you bring up some solid points. I want to touch on this real quick because I know everybody's curious about AI. You talked about AI a little bit, you kind of briefly hinted on it. Tell me a little bit more about your insights or your opinion on how you think this is going to change the marketing landscape, or what role is AI going to play in data or marketing in general, either is currently changing the landscape or what you think is going to change.
Well, it's already changed things dramatically. It used to
Yeah.
be if you were an advertiser, you would first have to start creating ads, which was
Mhm.
an expense. It wasn't that long ago just to create digital ads that were good for Facebook could cost you anywhere from five to $12,000 to produce some high quality ads. Well,
Mhm.
now with Facebook, and remember what's important to understand about Facebook is that 90+% of their advertisers are not clients that we work with. They're not large advertisers.
Right.
90% of their revenue comes from local small businesses and
Mm.
local nonprofits. So
Mm.
think your florist, your dentist, your massage therapist,
Mm.
your local dog rescue. And so they have used AI extensively to the point where you can go in and just type in the name of your business and they will go to your website, grab all sorts of information and automatically make ads for you.
Mm.
That's pretty amazing. Where
Mhm.
it's going is that Facebook knows everything there is to know about the people inside that controlled environment. They know what
Mm.
everyone likes, what they're looking for, and they actually want to do well for you. They want you to spend your
Mhm.
money. And if
Sure.
you get the return that you're supposed to get, they know you'll spend more.
Mm.
So where it will actually get to is that they can create variations of your ads that will perform better. So they'll start with one variation, and once enough people see it, they'll create another variation. But where
Mm.
it's actually going is this. Let's say you have an ad that has a dog in it. Let's say you're selling socks. You got these great socks and you have this dog and everyone likes the dog. But they come to you, Tasha, and they know that you don't like dogs, you like cats, let's say.
Mhm.
Where the AI is going to come in is that in real time, it's going to remove the dog and put a cat in it.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then you're more likely to click on it. You're more likely to feel better about the sock brand and buy
Yeah.
socks from this sock company. So that's where AI is going, is literally be able to tailor the ads in real time for every
Wow.
single individual. So it's just incredibly, incredibly powerful. For us in our business, we've integrated it extensively using internal tools that we've built out. There was a lot of aspects of our process that humans would have to get involved in, where we would stop the process, do some math, evaluate what the next step was. But we trained intelligent automation, which essentially is AI, to do those steps so that now humans don't have to touch any aspect of it and it can go through this entire kind of four-part machine learning process.
Mm.
So it's amazing. Uh, but there's a lot of changes that are coming as a result of this. I think one of the most interesting things and one of the most interesting kind of takeaways that I've had with it is for me, and probably for you as well, it feels like that this stuff is moving really fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
That and for anybody who's listening, you probably feel like, my God, AI, it's like, what's going to come next? I can barely keep up with it. It's just
Mhm.
moving so quickly. Every week is something new. Well, I sat in on an industry call about 2 months ago, and we sat in on a call with 14 and 15-year-olds, and there was about seven of them from all across the US and around the world. And we were able to ask them questions. And most of the folks on the call were asking them questions about how are you using AI? What are you doing? And stuff like that. And I asked them a
Mhm.
very simple question, which was, hey, to me and most of us on the call, this stuff is moving really fast.
Mhm.
Do you think it's moving fast? And they all said,
Mm.
no, it feels like technology to them. So
Mm.
it's important for us to recognize, yes, it feels like it's moving fast because it's new to us, but to the folks that are teenagers,
Right.
this is a regular tool
Normal.
to them and it's completely normal.
Right.
And so that gave me a lot of perspective and it made me look back to when I was younger and looking back to the tools that I was using to folks that were 10, 20, 30, 40 years older than me and thinking, okay, wow, this must feel like things are moving fast to them. So we can all kind of relate to that. It's not
Hmm.
moving fast. It's technology, and technology always moves at the speed that it does, but it just feels fast
Hmm.
to us because we have to make changes as a result of it.
Right. Right.
I probably spend 2 to 3 hours a week just tinkering around with it, just so I feel like I'm utilizing the tools for what they are,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
also able to keep up so that my business can, move along at the speed that everything else is moving at.
Yeah, it makes absolute sense. I mean, you talked about, younger people are not seeing this as moving so fast. And I'm just thinking about, my 11-year-old playing like Roblox, and there's like new apps and new games and new add-ons like every day that she's, trying to convince me to, buy or whatever. But, and for somebody that's, in that world, they know nothing different. It's like, not so much that there's like new stuff, there's always new stuff because there's so many options for technology and tools and add-ons and redevelopments with existing platforms that you already use. It's constantly evolving, constantly changing. So it doesn't feel like it's moving fast. It just feels like a continuation of the change that's always happening, right? It's a very interesting perspective. I'm running out of time, so I want to leave with this last question that I always like to ask guests. If there is one thing or one piece of advice that you can give nonprofit leaders who want to make sure their marketing dollars are supporting their mission, even if they can't track everything perfectly, what advice would you give to them?
Well, what I would say is that most marketers who are doing any type of paid advertising, they're tracking clicks. And there's
Hmm.
probably someone in the organization that has a Google sheet, and it's got like every day of the last year, how much money they spent, where they spent it at, how many clicks it got, and they calculate this thing called cost per click,
Hmm.
and then how many
Hmm.
visits they had and stuff like that. And what I would say is it's time to refocus your attention, because chances are when they downloaded that data, there was a column there that they ignored called impressions.
Hmm.
Impressions are how many ads were actually shown.
Hmm.
And that is the closest metric we have to attention.
Hmm.
And what I would say is I would redo that sheet today, and I would download all of those impressions.
Hmm.
And so when you have it, what I would do is that instead of looking at clicks, I would graph your impressions. And
Hmm.
what you're going to see is you're going to see that like over a couple of days, first off, your impressions are never going to be the same every day.
Hmm.
And you're going to
Hmm.
see that they may rise during a certain time. And then you're going to look and you may see clicks aren't going up that time. They're
Hmm.
actually, but they go up maybe a couple of days, maybe a week or two later. So you want to look at that relationship between when the impressions went up and when the clicks went up later on. There's that time delay, that kind of
Hmm.
drag that happens. And then you want to go back to look at when the impressions were up. What were you
Hmm.
doing? What were you
Hmm.
buying? And I
Hmm.
would say do more of that stuff. Now, the
Okay.
truth is, you could actually do the same thing with your organic content too, because anytime you put out a post, it tracks how many views there are. You just have
Right.
to start tracking it as well. But I would refocus. The number one thing you can do is refocus your attention from clicks, which is the impact of the ads and the impact of what you're doing, and instead focus on impressions,
All right.
which is the equivalent of the attention and the awareness you want to drive.
Okay. Well, I wrote that down for myself. Hopefully, you all are paying attention to that as well. So, Jeff, there are people out there that's like, love everything that you're saying, totally over my head. I need some more support in this, and this is a focus area for our organization. And getting more support on the marketing front. If people were listening and wanted to get more resources or insight from you, or just have a conversation about how you might be able to help their organization, what is the best way to get in touch with you?
The best way is to go to provalytics.com. You can go to getprova, GETPROVA.com. Prova is actually an Italian word that means proof, because
Hmm.
this is all about proving that what you did actually had the impact that you were expecting. Uh,
Hmm.
and on the site, there's a lot of resources, information that you can download. But that's the best way to kind of get started on your journey to understanding that, essentially, like we talked about in the beginning, half the money I spend is wasted. We're able to point people to what's being wasted and then
Hmm.
how to take those dollars and redeploy them towards things where the money's not being wasted.
Makes absolute sense. Jeff, thank you so much for your time, your insights, your expertise. I've personally learned quite a bit on this conversation, so thank you for this. And for you nonprofit leaders out there, if nothing else, as I often say in these conversations, even if you haven't found the perfect solution to your problem right now, at least we'll give a little bit of validation and that you are not alone in struggling to figure out how to make your marketing dollars matter, how to measure your marketing impact. But there certainly are people out there that can serve as a resource to help you change that for your organization. And as always, this is my shameless pitch. If you found this information on this particular episode insightful, or you gained a few nuggets to take away from, please interact with this content in some way, because, as we're talking about the meta world and impressions and all of those things, that's what allows other nonprofit leaders to find episodes like this. Thank you all so much for listening. I'll see you next time. Bye.